You're listening to TheESP, the European Skeptics podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 518. I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. Servus.
Hejsan, are we now switching the greetings here? Good, servus on you too as well. Where in the world are you?
I'm in the exciting big city in Taiwan called Kaohsiung.
Kaohsiung.
Yeah, and heading back towards Taipei tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Taking up the high-speed rail. That's good.
Ooh, nice.
That's the one, the Shinkansen that is used in Japan as well. It's the Japanese technology, and it whooshes through.
Whooshes, that's the word.
Yes. It's like
good verb
because that actually does happen when when it passes in front of you and you're standing on next to the platform. It just whoosh. It's unbelievable. 300 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
That is quite a high speed. We would need more of those in Europe. So please, between European countries, that would be very nice. Instead of flying around in Europe, we should have these extra high speed rails. I mean, not necessarily 300 kilometers per hour only. We could even go higher than that with maglevs or something.
Yes, there is one. I've been to Tokyo, but I've never tried a Shinkansen. But I have been to Shanghai, where they have a very fast train between. Have you been there? Between the airport into the city. Yeah. That's much faster than. I think that is maglev. I think that's faster than 300. It is, Yes, it's. Now you talk whoosh.
Yeah, they can achieve ridiculously high speeds.
Yeah.
I think it's much more effective than planes.
Well, for some things.
Europe should be considering that.
Yeah, I think so. Speaking of Europe, we've been mentioning the snow and the cold weather this winter quite a lot. It's unavoidable that people start to think about global warming and how that is related to these current cold spells that we have had for the last couple of weeks or even more, maybe.
And the planes that we are flying on. Yeah.
What do you mean the planes?
I mean, how it's related to all the planes that we're flying on, instead of using maglevs.
Right, okay, yes, yeah. I think most of our listeners know enough about the difference between climate and weather, but perhaps not every cranky Uncle Frank does. See Cranky Uncle game, if you will. It's a very good game about this. But I think this is why it's so good we have science to inform us rather than just go with our gut feelings because, it's getting colder again. Mm-hmm. And we are big fans of the European Copernicus Climate Change Service, right? That monitors not just European weather, but global weather and keeps track of the trends. And last week they released a report regarding the temperatures for January 2026. And yes, later half of January has been colder in Europe than January usually is, or have been for a long while anyway. And it's still cold. I mean, we are now in the early or mid-February and it's still cold. But this is mainly driven by what they call a wavier than usual polar jet stream. And that is what has allowed cold Arctic air to spill further down in Europe and also in North America than is commonly happening. But for the globe, they point out, it's very different. January 2026 was the fifth warmest January globally, with an average surface air temperature of 0.51 degrees centigrade above the 1991 to 2020 average for January. And compared to the warmest January on record, which was in 2025, January 2026 was only 0.28 degrees cooler. And globally, January 2026 was 1.47 centigrades above the estimated 1850 to 1900 average, which is, the period we usually use to define the pre-industrial level.
Yeah.
And also, the shift of this polar jet stream is also probably due to climate change, even if it's hard to specifically say so. Because if the whole Earth is getting warmer, there is more energy in the system and crazy things start to happen. So
exactly
locally,
what I was going to say,
So locally, it could be colder at points, but it doesn't mean that the Earth is no longer getting warmer.
Yeah, so lots of streams are being driven by the differences in energy, differences in temperature. So if those seem to be fluctuating more, that could very well be. And my understanding is that that is basically the consensus as well, that is what's causing it. So we might be seeing more of this as we go along.
Could be.
Yeah.
We're supposed to get more snow tomorrow, actually, here in Sweden. We still have snow, and I think there will be another 10 centimeters tomorrow. So,
okay. So where I'm currently at, Kaohsiung, is very warm. Today it was going up to like 25, 26 degrees. But the north of Taiwan is unusually cold. I mean, usually even during this winter time, it doesn't necessarily go below 15 degrees towards the top of the island. But this winter, they have seen temperatures going closer down to like 5 degrees. And that is considered extreme here. But on top of the mountains, extreme amounts of snow were seen. You know, the whole island is basically a big chain of mountains, very tall ones at that. Yeah, pretty crazy. So my clients are
cold,
going wild about that because obviously they are cold all the time. So they came here to escape the cold weather back home, and that's what they got. I don't mind that because I prefer the cold. Which means that I'm probably, as time passes, less and less suitable for living on Earth, which is...
Yeah, well, you have to consider your options. I don't know where you could go, but...
Yeah, not many of them. Unfortunately. Nah, that's just my luck. So, shall we move on to the regular things like This Week in Skeptical History?
Let's do that.
Okay. This week, there will be a date that is, not only familiar to many, but also widely beloved date. That's the 14th of February, obviously. Ooh. Valentine's Day. Well, it happens to be my birthday as well, but that's not why I'm choosing this as... Thank you. I'm not why I'm choosing this as my TWISH apropos. It's because on the 14th of February 1949, someone very close to my heart was born here in Hungary. The quizmaster and prominent skeptic called István Vágó. He was, for a long time, the face of reason and skepticism in Hungary. And while many in the country remember him as the nation's quizmaster, which he was for several decades, skeptics know him more as a fierce defender of science and an arch enemy of pseudoscientists. That he was also a founding pillar of the organized skeptical movement in my little country. So I think he's well worth talking about as the hero of This Week in Skeptical History. So he was born in 1949. And he didn't start in a television studio. He was a trained chemical engineer with a talent for languages. He reportedly spoke or understood over 10 of them. He had very high advanced certificates of conduct of English, German, French, and Spanish. And he said he had a conduct of Italian and Portuguese to be able to give interviews. And he learned all kinds of different languages that were only his written skills and stuff. So that he was really a language buff. But his scientific foundation, as well as his keen interest in languages and many other aspects of culture, was really the bedrock of his whole public persona. When he rose to fame in the late 70s and 80s, he quickly became the undisputed king of quiz shows in Hungary. You can ask anyone of my generation and above, they would immediately say that it's definitely István Vágó who was the king of quiz. Especially when he ended up running the Hungarian version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I think most of our listeners will be familiar with that franchise. So he became an absolute symbol of the value of factual knowledge, the trivia and quiz kind of factoids, and he indeed was extremely knowledgeable too. But with his scientific background and with his scientific training, and he's being fed up with the media landscape being cluttered with sensationalism, he promoted the idea that being right matters and that evidence is the only currency worth trading. His transition from a knowledgeable host of shows to an active skeptic was completely seamless. But in 1992, when James Randi visited the Hungarian group of scientists and thinkers, who ended up calling themselves the Society of the Respecters of Facts. I think I mentioned that on the show before.
Yes, you have, yeah.
That was a group that was there to fight the rising tide of paranormal claims in the post-communist era of Hungary. And he joined that group in 1992. And he was like the most public figure out of all the members. But then in 2006, István Vágó became a founding member and the first president of the Hungarian Skeptics Society, the very organization that I'm currently heading.
Yoo-hoo.
And I knew him personally. At some point, we were in quite good terms, but that unfortunately changed towards the end of his membership of the Hungarian Skeptics. But more on that later. So he didn't just lend his name to the letterhead of the organization. He used his massive media platform to challenge all kinds of frauds like energy healers, astrologers, homeopaths, and he did it on national TV. So that was pretty big because his name really drew a lot of attention. In fact, whenever I talk about the Hungarian Skeptics Society, and sometimes, you know, when my travelers, my clients, when they go on a tour and like 10 days or a week prior to the tour, they get an info sheet with all the necessary information about the tour. They also get the name of the tour guide, so they usually look me up. And they then come up to me telling me that they have found out something about me and what's this skepticism thing, and does it have anything to do with Vágó? So that's a big thing. He's still the name that comes to most Hungarians' mind when the name Hungarian Skeptics Society is mentioned. So he's really... He burned into the minds of people with that. And he wrote a book in 2000. He wrote several books on different topics, but this one was very important for us skeptics in 2011. It was titled Vigyázat csalók, which translates as Beware Frauds, and it still serves as a kind of a manual for identifying pseudoscientific scams that range from miracle cancer cures to all kinds of spiritual mediums. But if we are to be skeptically honest, he really was a bit of a polarizing figure. His style was often described as combative. He did not believe in agreeing to disagree when it came to objective reality. Mm-hmm. Which is in a way understandable that from a communication point of view, it's not necessarily the right approach, right? Mm-hmm. So at least you should be able to go into a conversation without trying to tear the face off of your opponent. So to him, an alternative fact was simply a lie, and he didn't try to explain why that is so, but he called people liars outright, and that really just worked in alienating them. Of course. Yeah. Exactly, it does. So some critics and even some fellow skeptics argued that his approach could be elitist or overly aggressive, potentially alienating the very people that he hoped to convince. And we had heated arguments. Oh God, we had lots of those within the Hungarian Skeptics Society. Unfortunately, though, later in life, he entered the political arena and became a leading figure in the party called Democratic Coalition. And this move was very controversial, especially among skeptics, of course. Mind you that I did something similar, but I was not a household name. So when you are, it's a different level. Nobody really cares about my little period of my life that I had a brush with politics. But he was really into it big time. And his move was also controversial. Critics argued that it blurred the line between scientific skepticism and political activism. On the other hand, Vágó maintained that fighting for a rational European Hungary was simply the logical extension of his skeptical worldview, which is also something that has merit to it. So, unfortunately, he passed away in 2023, and I'd like to mention here how spooky his death was in a way, especially for me. In 2023, on April the 22nd, we handed out the Flat Earth Award to someone who is also a household name in Hungary in the field of popular psychology. And her name is Emőke Bogdi. Because she was just talking rubbish about how genes are activated or deactivated when we try to educate young people about gender issues. So it's that kind of rubbish that she was talking. Yeah. And we gave her the Flat Earth Award. And oh boy, the backlash that we got from media outlets close to the government that tried everything to completely dishonor us and try to throw all kinds of dirt at us. And he was caught in that fire as well. So unfortunately, everyone started referring back to him and his political activism, even though in 2023, he had already left the Hungarian Skeptics, especially because of his political actions, and he didn't want that to be hindering our work. So he was not the member anymore, but people still tried to use his connection to us like a disqualifying factor. Anyhow, I kind of felt like we had to apologize to him because he got dragged into this whole thing. And I wrote him a message apologizing. And he says, "Don't worry about it. We're all going to survive this. You guys and me too." And 2 days later, he dies. Yeah. And that was, I will never, ever forget that. I mean, I know as a skeptic, it has nothing to do with that. Yeah. It was his health that he didn't really take care of himself during his life. But still, it was really spooky. But we have tried to keep his legacy intact as a skeptic. And he does remain embedded in the Hungarian Skeptic Society's mission. He taught a generation of Hungarians that it's okay to say, "I don't believe you, show me the evidence." I think that's a big thing. So, on the occasion of his birthday, let us remember him, not just as the man with all the answers at a quiz show, but as the man who taught us how to ask the right questions. István Vágó.
All right. Happy birthday to you and him.
Yeah, thank you.
So, all presidents of Hungarian Skeptics need to be born on the same date, right? That's the rule now.
No, actually, it's 2 out of 3.
Okay.
That was born on the same date.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gabor wasn't. The other Gabor, because I'm Gabor as well.
Gabor Raško.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to confuse anyone, so my second name is Gabor. Yeah. My middle name. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the skeptical news.
Yes, listeners may remember the name Asim Malhotra. He is the cardiologist that received the shameful Rusty Razor Award in 2023. He's mainly known for spreading misinformation about statins, what is often prescribed to people with high cholesterol levels. So statins are generally credited with saving innumerable lives, but for some reason Malhotra has decided that they are overprescribed, unnecessary and dangerous. Well, he is wrong. And they're probably not only safer than he claims, but a new report says statins are also safer than what is written on the patient information leaflet that by law has to be in the packet of pills when you buy them in most countries, right? So this report was conducted by the CTT collaboration. That is the Cholesterol Treatment Trialist collaboration in the UK. And the study that they did is the most comprehensive assessment of evidence for listed side effects of statins. It examined 19 randomized controlled trials involving 124,000 people with an average follow-up of 4.5 years for each person. The results showed that the risk of most listed side effects was minimal, while the benefits far outweighed the potential harm. For example, the percentage of people suffering memory loss per year was similar to those taking statin than to those who did not. The percentage of people who had sleep problems were also similar to those not taking statins. So, the study's lead author, Christina Reith, I have no idea how to
Reith?
pronounce
it.
Reith?
That's a whole different realm.
Reith. Reith. Well, she's an associate professor at Oxford University, and she had this to say, quote, "This means that we now have really good evidence that although these things may well happen to people while they are taking statins, statins are not the cause of these problems," end quote. So what we see here is that following up people who take statins, that often focuses on people who are older, of course. And naturally, they will go through certain changes due to their age, and this may easily then be associated with the statins that they're taking, even if this is something that would happen to them anyway. So I will read here the conclusion of the study. Quote, "No evidence of casualty was found for the vast majority, 62 out of 66, of other outcomes listed as potential undesirable effects of treatments in statin labels." So, out of 66 listed possible side effects, they only found evidence for 4 of them. Most of them are not side effects of the statins.
But they're still listed.
Yeah, they're still listed there, and they have to be there. So take that, Malhotra. The statins are not dangerous. They are even less harmful than it says on the actual package.
I would like to mention here that when I read the script, the word statin first didn't read to me as statin. I thought it was Stalin. I was really intrigued to find out what the side effects of Stalin are. Yeah.
You have to wait for that.
Because usually death. It was usually death, actually.
Yes. More about Russia later, I'm afraid.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, but let's move on to Hungary first. I'd like to give a bit of a skeptical snapshot of the Hungarian political circus. Actually, now, in that area, the only thing that is more inflated than the prices in Hungary is the campaign rhetoric. People are absolutely going apeshit now with their political rhetoric. So, the April 26 elections are looming. So, Hungary has become a bit of a masterclass in how to fail at both following the rules and reading a spreadsheet. So, how am I bringing the two things together? First of all, let's talk about Meta's political ad ban. We have mentioned this on this show before, back in October, yes, when Meta and Google, they pinky promised to stop all political ads in the EU to avoid these all kinds of pesky transparency regulations that they just didn't want to adhere because it was too troublesome. Okay, so they decided to outright just ban everything. But in Hungary, Fidesz, and I mentioned this earlier, but now there are new numbers coming out. Fidesz, the governing party, seems to treat these bans as more of a suggestion rather than an actual rule. According to recent data from Lakmus, one of the best Hungarian fact-checker organizations, Fidesz candidates managed to sneak at least 162 political ads onto Facebook in January alone. How did they do that? By using the classic, it's not a political ad, it's just me talking about salt caves or whatever maneuver. So candidates like Zsolt Pop posted videos about local Himalayan salt caves or animal protection, or subtly reminding everyone they're running for office without ever ticking the "this is a political ad" kind of box. Of the 181 ads that were identified by Political Capital, run by Peter Greco, whom we have interviewed on the show before. Yeah. So Meta's AI only caught 19 out of the 181 of these ads. So it turns out, if you don't mention the P word, the algorithms just think there are really enthusiastic tourists who are talking about occasionally politically important topics. So please everyone take a note that transparency in tech is only as good as the filter. And right now, the filter for these organizations has huge, massive holes that are big enough to drive a campaign bus through. And they are driving those campaign buses through. So it's ridiculous. But unfortunately, the opposition isn't really off the hook either. So Péter Magyar, who's this rising candidate for prime minister, and he's really gaining momentum, and it really looks like they could actually defeat Fidesz. And the party behind him is called Tisza, and they just released their grand election manifesto. But well, it's a numbers game that they seem to be losing, in a way. There are lots of numbers, lots of plans, but obviously they are trying to make their case backed up by actual numbers as well. And in there, their program claims that since 2010, prices of some household items and everyday groceries have risen like 15-20-fold, including some things like toilet paper that they claim has risen 20-fold, sour cream has risen 15-fold, and it's terrifying, right? So it really looks bad. Until you look at the footnotes of the Central Statistical Office that they claim to have as the source of this information. And obviously, when you see that, you think that, okay, this is right. Well, not necessarily if you know how since 2010, Fidesz government has really cheated, and they have been caught cheating with the numbers of the Hungarian Statistical Office. But put this aside, because it turns out that the TISA programmers who wrote the whole manifesto failed to notice that the Central Statistical Office changed the units for these certain items from 2010 to 2015. So now they are measuring in larger quantities. So they compared the 2010 price of a single roll of toilet paper to the 2024 price of an 8-pack. So obviously, that's very easy to end up with, well, like a 20-fold increase in the price if you multiply everything by 8. So, to start with. And that's a real shame, because they should be the ones who are reliable with the numbers, because that is what builds our trust, especially that of skeptics, right? And when it comes to sour cream, they compared a tiny 175-gram tub to a full kilogram. Okay, Hungarian inflation is undeniably high, but it hasn't quite reached toilet paper is the new gold levels. But if you're an opposition staffer who skips the fine print, this is what happens. So please be more careful if you want to be taken seriously, because this is our future that hangs on the balance here.
Yeah, that's not good for credibility if you want to be an alternative to Orban.
Yeah. So these are the two things that currently stand out to me in the race for a Hungarian government, and we should all stay skeptical. We're going to need it.
When badly. Is the election day again?
It's the 12th of April.
12th of April, coming up soon.
And you know what really hurts me is that I won't be able to be at home.
Okay. Can you vote in advance?
No, I cannot. I can't vote in advance. I cannot cast a distant vote. So no mail-in votes.
Wow.
Not for regular citizens anyway. And since I'll be in Taiwan, I don't have the option to walk into the embassy and just do it, because we don't have a freaking embassy here. Because obviously,
because you don't want to be
is allowed.
Yeah, you don't want to make enemies out of China. So yes,
exactly. So Sweden doesn't have an embassy here either. What we do have, all of us, is what we call commerce office or something like that. So it's ridiculous because it's a de facto embassy. It works as such. But there are so few Hungarians here in this country that de facto embassy doesn't organize voting for these poor souls. So I won't be able to cast a vote.
So it'll be your fault if Orban is re-elected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to apologize in advance. Yeah.
All right, Andras. When we started this podcast, which was a long time ago now, I figured we would talk about a lot of things. I mean, like alternative medicine, misinformation, logical fallacies, and many other things like that. And we have.
That's right.
And we do. That's what we do. But I never thought we would talk so much about exorcism at all, really. Because that surely cannot be.
Really?
Yeah, but that surely cannot be a thing in modern Europe.
Yeah.
Well, I was wrong. We have talked about it over the years, and now it's time again. It's unbelievable. A very good investigative journalist called Matilda Skarehag in Sweden has done a deep dive into modern-day exorcism in Sweden, and, as we will see, not just in Sweden. I mean, it's not limited to just Sweden. This was published as a radio documentary on Swedish National Radio. At first, we follow an interview with a woman called Chance, and I'm afraid it's going to be quite disturbing, this account. I apologize about this, but it's important, so I'll do it anyway. Chance is now 28 years old, but she was subjected to exorcism when she was between 9 and 11 years old. She came to Sweden with her foster parents from Congo-Kinshasa, and after about 6 months or so, they started to blame her for things that didn't go well for the family. Not major things, but whenever things went wrong, it was probably her fault in a way. But they just came to that conclusion. They had children of their own as well, coming with them, biologically theirs. But they figured that Chance, she was 9 when they arrived, she must be a witch. Some demon or demons, perhaps, possessed her. And they became afraid of her. They started to mistreat her psychologically and physically to try to get the demon out of her. This is a typical belief in parts of Africa, typically Congo-Kinshasa, Nigeria, Angola, probably other places as well. And it is, in some places at least, called Kindoki, which I believe is Swahili, but I'm not quite sure about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, unofficial word of the week, I guess. Kindoki means exorcism. Or it's kind of exorcism. The belief is that when something goes against the plans of the family, just like they perceived it did, it is due to someone in their close vicinity, somebody who's trying to sabotage things. It doesn't have to be a family member, it could be a neighbor or so. But these people, they are witches, and they have become recruited by other witches to sabotage the family. So in secret, they are, during night, they fly away to be with other witches, and they do bad things there, and they may not remember afterwards. So you don't know, as a witch, you don't know if you're a witch. So you understand, if you're 9 years old and somebody keep saying that you're a witch, you're flying out here in the evenings or in the nights, you're flying away and doing bad stuff, but you can't remember it because you can't. And then you start to believe maybe it's true.
Yeah. And what can that do to your mental health?
Yeah. No, that is really, really bad. Really, really scary. Yeah. So these foster parents, they started to pray for Chance in more and more forceful ways, sometimes forcing her to stay up all night while they were chanting and screaming at her to make the spirit go away. They also cut her hair very short because somehow the power of the spirit may be in the hair, so they cut her hair, which meant that she had to wear an ugly-looking, smelly wig at school. And also they gave her bad clothing and stuff. So she became a point for other children to bully her at school. And when they still couldn't get the spirit out of her, because, spoiler, there was no spirit there to begin with, they also started hitting her to the point that at one point she was treated for a skull fracture and she had to spend time at a hospital. She was not allowed to use the bathroom at home because they were afraid that if she did that, it could be sort of spreading to the other children or the other family members. So she had nowhere to go to the toilet. God. She 9 and 10 years old she was at the time. So she had no other alternative. She couldn't go out either without permission. So she peed on the floor of her room. And the foster parents were furious about that. But what was she supposed to do? They made her clean that up with chlorine, and then they forced her to drink the contents of the bucket afterwards.
No.
When she needed to poo, She did that on pieces of paper and threw that out of the window because she couldn't find any other way of doing that. And this went on for at least half a year or so. But the school and the teachers there started to raise the alarm. Something wasn't right. They could tell that something was wrong. So after some investigation and interventions, Chance was forcibly removed from her family and placed with another family. However, after a few months, the new family was convinced by the first family to also believe that she was a witch. So again, Chance had to be removed from that family. Luckily, this time, she came to a family with another cultural background, and she was safe there, and she was able to lead a normal life. But naturally, the trauma of her experience never went away. She's feeling bad until this day, she says, of course. She has mental health problems from this trauma. In fact, she didn't tell anyone about the worst things that they had done to her until a few years later, because she didn't trust the other adults. She didn't think that they would believe her. But she was believed by the third family. She was the good family. And eventually, her story became the grounds for a police report. And both of her foster parents were sentenced to a few years in jail, actually.
Oh, okay.
So it sort of ends happily or good, but
no,
of
not
course
for her,
she is.
But,
but of course she's marked for life. But what she had to suffer through, and she's now planning to write a book about her experiences, and I think that's a very good thing because it needs to come out. But the thing is, Chance is not alone, not even in Sweden. Around roughly the same time, another couple, unrelated to Chance's family, they were also convicted for mistreating their daughter in similar ways for similar reasons. But there's more. This reporter, the one who did this documentary, has tracked down at least 60 other cases with similar stories. And there are even reports about Kindoki in the UK. So it's not just Sweden. It can happen in any country in Europe. And here is where prejudice may lead us a little bit astray. Maybe even our own racism, because it's easy to think, well, this is a family from Africa, right? And their religion is not our religion, so it couldn't really happen to us, Europeans. Well, Chance belonged to a Christian family. These were Christians. African Christian, but Christian.
Yeah.
The other thing is that among the other cases that I mentioned, and of course we must realize that there are a lot of unknown cases as well. We don't know about all of them. Many of them were not with an African background. Many of the other cases belonged to Sweden Christians. The so-called free churches that are not the formal state church of Sweden, they have nothing to do with Africa at all. So it happens in other churches as well, in Christian churches that we would regard as very European.
Yeah.
So these free churches in Sweden, we know about these. People are looking, we're looking strangely at them, saying they are a bit funny, a bit strange, but we don't know what's going on there. We know that a lot of them are speaking in tongues, there are mysticism, and even, yes, we've heard about exorcism in these churches. But they're very closed for non-members, so no outsider really knows what's happening there. And we hear about some cases, we hear rumors, and some things may become public, but I'm sure that there's a lot of things going on that we don't know. So exorcism is a serious problem in Europe today, in Sweden today, in the UK, and probably in all countries. We've talked about this before. I remember vaguely we talked about a story of Norwegian exorcism many years ago. And so it happens. It happens.
What I don't understand about this is that the belief that someone is possessed by demons or the devil or anything, it's so out there. It should be ridiculous to all of us. That is just mind-boggling to me. But yeah, there are real concerns when it comes to assessing the reality of something, right? Well, young people can be really left alone with these issues of trying to make sense of things that are happening to them. And while a lot of young people will probably tell you that exorcism is nonsensical, sometimes they still struggle to distinguish between true and false statements, especially on the part of politicians. So in the UK, where the government is pushing ahead with an elections bill to lower the voting age to 16, we have to consider that giving people the right to vote is only half the battle, because the other half is ensuring that they have the tools to tell fact from fiction when it comes to listening to politicians and what they have to say. There is a new report from Full Fact, which is a fact-checking organization, and they are a pretty amazing bunch of people. And they teamed up with Internet Matters, and they have dropped some sobering numbers on just how prepared, or unprepared rather, these new voters actually feel when they are asked about it. The short answer is that they are massively worried. According to this survey that was done on over 1,300 young people and parents, nearly 80% of teens are already seeing political content on their feeds long before they hit the ballot box, and they struggle to tell if what they're reading is true. Only about half of them feel they can actually do that. And that is concerning. And there is an even more striking thing, and that is what we can call the AI factor. We talk a lot about deepfakes and generative AI on this show. And it turns out that the kids are paying attention. Well, not necessarily to us, but the problem. I really hope that lots of young people are listening to this show as well. If you do, please let us know, by the way. So we would like to know if you're a school kid or if you're at university even. Anyhow, 60% of young people surveyed fear that AI-generated content will mislead voters and swing election results. And they might be onto something. The worry about this is that when people don't feel they have the tools to verify information and they don't feel confident enough, they don't just become careful. What they become is cynical.
Yeah.
The report found that 6 in 10 young people are now opting to simply ignore politicians and parties entirely because they feel the information environment is too poisoned to navigate through. And 6 in 10 young people. That is a huge number. Yeah, but let's concentrate on what should be done. So Full Fact does exactly that, and they are calling this a missed opportunity if the government doesn't step up. They're recommending 4 key pillars: better media literacy in the school curriculum, a national vision statement on how to handle misinformation, funding for the Electoral Commission to run public awareness campaigns, and, crucially, holding social media companies' feet to the fire. Which I'd like to emphasize specifically, as we mentioned earlier, that this is a big issue. Full Fact wants to see mandatory labels on AI content, couldn't agree more, and something like a read before you share kind of prompt to slow down the spread of viral nonsense. And I'd like to remind everyone that this has been tried. This was introduced at some point during the pandemic, if you remember.
Yeah. Yes.
And it was abandoned, completely abandoned by media companies, social media companies. Should not have been.
No, but it goes against the policy. They want to have quick clicks, more click,
exactly,
click, click, click.
Exactly.
So this goes against their interests. Yeah.
Exactly. But from a skeptical perspective, this is, I think, is a classical case of capability versus rights. So you can give someone a car, but if you haven't taught them how to drive, or if the road is covered in black ice, it's going to be a rough ride. Okay? Yeah. So this is the same with voting. And if you want 16-year-olds to participate in democracy, which I kind of support, especially because most of the decisions will affect their future, but then they would have to be included in the discussion in a way that they have access to correct information and the right kind of information as well. So we need to ensure that they aren't being fed a diet of deepfakes and rage bait without a skeptical filter. We'll be keeping an eye on whether the UK government actually puts their money where their mouth is regarding media literacy education. So one more thing for Sir Keir Starmer to juggle with, and I really hope that he'll have more success with this than with most things.
Everything else he's doing, okay.
Yeah, so obviously the report can be accessed on fullfact.org, but we will put up the link on the show notes as well.
Mm. Okay, I'm going to take you back. This is almost This Week in Skepticism, or at least historical skepticism, but
okay.
we will get to the modern times eventually. The murder of Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1986 was never solved. Palme was a very influential politician, both in Sweden and abroad. He dominated the Swedish political scene very much. He was in and out of office for at least 20 years. Very colorful, and in all appearances driven by true conviction, I must say, passion for what he believed in. I believe most people see it that way, regardless of whether you agree with his political views or not. Yeah. He was a social democrat, rather on the left side, I would say. Internationally, he was very anti-war. He was a vocal critic of the Vietnam War, for instance. He wasn't without his flaws either. But he was very sincere and respected, all put together. In 1986, Sweden was in an innocent era compared with today. In a way, that innocence died together with Palme. He and his wife, he was in office at the time. He was the Swedish prime minister, very well known. But he and his wife was at a public cinema in the evening, watching an ordinary film. I can't remember what it was, doesn't matter. He was there together with everybody else, and he had no security, nothing to protect them. And the couple strolled through Stockholm after the movie was over, near midnight, fairly deserted streets, and it appears that the assassin stood waiting for them at a corner and shot Palme dead. And then he left, the perpetrator left through an alleyway before anybody had time to react to anything. And obviously, since the killer was never found, there have been numerous conspiracy theories and rumors on who did it and why. I think it is universally accepted that the police investigation was a big fiasco and failure. A lot of effort was made to prove that the Turkish Kurdish freedom organization PKK, which Palme had criticized several times, they were supposed to be behind it, but no connection could ever be proved. Later on, an individual called Christer Pettersson was tried after being identified by Palme's wife Lisbeth. But Pettersson was more or less a homeless drunk, and nobody really understood what his motive could have been. No motive could ever be established. There were some speculations. And there were no concrete evidence found. So eventually, after a long, very public trial, he was acquitted. And it took forever to finish that one. And eventually the track had grown so cold that there's no real hope now to find out who really was behind the whole thing. At the time, there were lots of ideas. Lots of books have been published claiming to know what was going on, but they are speculation mostly. There was one other person. He was called Stig Engström. He was present when Palme was shot. He was interviewed by the police. He was a witness. But he wasn't suspected in his lifetime. But after he died in the year 2000, more and more opinions were raised about him being there. What was he doing there really? Because that was the only person they knew, actually, who could be proven to be there. Maybe he was the killer, just masquerading as a witness. But there was no real proof. So therefore, it came as a big surprise in 2020. When the police and the public prosecutor's office held a press conference where they presented Engström as the person they suspected of murdering Palme. And they did so. They didn't have a murder weapon. They didn't have any technical evidence. And the only thing they had on him was that he was there, of course. With that, they closed the investigation of Palme and said, we can no longer go to trial because the person we suspect for doing it, he's dead. So
he's dead,
so we can't do it. That was 6 years ago. It was met with a lot of criticism at the time, but this is never over. Fast forward to December last year, when the High Prosecutor of Sweden, and he's called Lennart Guné, he took a formal decision, saying that the evidence against Stig Engström was insufficient. That means that the grounds for closing the investigation of the murder, they are no longer there. But no new investigation has been opened. They haven't reopened the investigation at all. Nothing is happening now. So what is going on? And the current Prosecutor General of Sweden, she is called Katarina Johansson Velin, and again, long Swedish names. But she is the High Prosecutor's superior. She has defended the old decision to close the investigation before. And she has not spoken up now that when her employee has decided that there were not sufficient evidence against Engström. So it is a mess, this. They're still messing this up.
Yeah, the one would think that they occasionally communicate. So they could have discussed it among themselves before either of them goes public with their opinion. So
yeah,
it's like
very, very strange. Very, very strange.
Wow.
So this is now 40 years. This year it's 40 years since this murder. The investigation has been closed, but the people who has closed it have then backed out and said, well, maybe we didn't have enough reason to close it down. I don't know. I wish I had some clever way of ending this news item, but the only thing I can say that is can people be surprised if there are new conspiracy theories coming up? It's really
no. It's definitely not a surprise. Obviously, they want to feel the gaps. They want to feel like they're in the know.
We all want to know what happened, right? On some level,
exactly.
And when people don't know what has happened, and if the official authorities are just making a mess out of it, amateurs will come forward and say that they do know, or they will invent things, either because they are convinced. They can convince themselves, or because they want the attention.
Yeah.
This is our Kennedy murder. This is the equivalence of the JFK assassination in the US. We will never get rid of this, I'm sure. Because by now, 40 years later, I don't think we will ever find out what happened. My personal opinion is that it probably was a lone guy who did that, because if there was a big conspiracy behind it, somebody would have spoken up sooner or later. But if it was just one guy, and perhaps that guy is no longer alive, then there's no one to tell what happened.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm eager to do?
Mm-hmm.
Find out who's been really wrong lately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, you will find out. And it's going to be a short one, even if it's serious. In the recent weeks, there have been several reports that indicate that people from Kenya have been deceived into traveling for high-paying work in Russia, only then to die on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Hey.
Dishonest labor recruitment offices, led by Russians, are luring Kenyans to go to Russia for work, and then they only end up in the war against their will. They're forced tricked into, I guess, signing papers in Cyrillic Russian that they can't understand. And they think they're signing up for work, but they're really being drafted for the Russian army and used as cannon fodder, basically. It's also reported today that the war has spent so many people's lives in Russia that there is a great lack of labor force there. And Putin is now flying in workers from India by the thousands to fill ordinary work because there's nobody to do the work. Due to the war, and there might be other reasons too, but partly due to the war, there is an estimated shortage of 2.3 million workers in Russia. And workers from ex-Soviet Central Asia who came before, because they don't need visas and they can easily come, they have more or less stopped coming in sufficient numbers. Russia is in a bad shape at the moment, and the leadership, of course, is terrible. And it feels rather inadequate to do this, but anyway, Vladimir Putin, for totally destroying your own country, as well as Ukraine, of course, you get this week's award for being really wrong. Again.
Yeah. I don't understand how people can be happy about what he does, but this is just how strong propaganda can be. But tricking people into this, that's a completely new level of low.
But it shows how desperate they are getting.
Yeah.
Which is maybe that is a good sign, even though desperate people with power, they do terrible things. So in the short term, that may not be a good news.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for that, Pontus. And that brings us to the last part of today's episode, which is, as usual, a quote. And this quote comes from English mentalist, illusionist, and writer Darren Brown, who said the following. Skepticism, after all, is about honest questioning, a spirit of engagement. Many call themselves skeptics, but are in fact cynics, refusing to engage or accept evidence at any level.
That's very true. There are more and more evidence that the big problem with misinformation is not that people believe in the misinformation. The bigger problem is that they stop believing in actual facts. Yeah. They become so cynical, they don't believe anything. And that may be a bigger problem.
Yeah, and then facts and opinions become almost equal. And they are treated as such. And that should not be the case. And if you call yourself a skeptic, please make sure that you are willing to accept evidence. Otherwise, you're just a denier. I mean, that's the thing with those people who call themselves vaccine skeptics and COVID skeptics and climate change skeptics. No, you're not. You're just a denier. And you trying to find your rationale to back up your already pre-existing conceptions. And those are misconceptions, basically. So, don't accept the evidence and go where the evidence leads. All right.
I will.
And we are I'm going soon where my nature leads me, and that is the bed. But yeah, because it's past midnight here. So I'd like to thank you, Pontus.
Good night.
Not only for your efforts, but also your flexibility with the timing, without which we could not be doing this show. Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so, and until next week, goodbye.
Hej då!
Viszlát. Viszontlátásra. This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social, like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others. I don't know how you can believe. This is episode 58.
Yes.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
It was minimal. Minimal.
They were minimal.
Has done a deep dive into modern day skepticism. Oh, modern day skepticism.
You wish.
Into modern day exorcism in Sweden. Chance is now 20 years old. No. Chance is now 28
Chances
years old.
are.
Shut up, it's hard enough.
Sorry.